All right. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, Jason, as well. And thanks to the association then too. And obviously, I'm preaching to the choir with everybody listening right now, but it's a phenomenal opportunity with the association just to share information, and then in some cases then pull folks together. And now we're doing it more virtually. So what I'm hoping actually to see in the future more as we try to look for the next step in the future here for the association is how do we move on from not just sharing information, but then really getting in some deeper discussions, some critical thinking. So that'll be good to see. So I'm excited to be with the group today. Again, the virtual opportunity is somewhat limiting because it'd be great to all be in one room. Although the other great thing is now we can actually expand even further than just the National Capital Region. So my intent right now is just to talk through a few points for the group. And then really, hopefully that sparks some questions, which we can dig in a little bit deeper. So first things first, as kind of a broader perspective thing is, why do we do what we do? And by that I mean Marine Corps logisticians, not McLog. So, and this is something that we live and hear all the time. But when you think of even just the Marine Corps slogan of, hey, we fight and win in every climb and place, I want you to actually stop for a second and realize that completely implies and assumes that we can get there and we could sustain ourselves. So that's from the viewpoint, of course, of generating the force, projecting or deploying the force. Once we get there, closing the force, and then sustaining the force. And that is all logistics. So even when you look at all of the other military services around the globe, and although they say Department or Ministry of Defense, we're really one of the only ones that really does that in an expeditionary way. And certainly I know I'm preaching to the choir with that, but every once in a while, it's good to actually just stop and realize how much logistics enables us to do that. That it completely expands or extends the reach of our force. And that's ultimately what we're trying to get at with McLog. So I just wanted to go through a few things. So first thing is the central position that McLog is in. So recently signed was a Marine Corps order called the Logistics, Tactics, Training, and Education Program, or the LTTTEP or LTEP. And that specifically lines out, here's what tactics, training, and education means to the logistics community, and it puts McLog kind of in that central position. Some folks would say the center of excellence. That's more from the viewpoint of being the center to pull it all in. Certainly, there's no one unit that's more excellent than another, but I will say that we're pretty prominently staffed with some heavy hitters that are really just coming out of the FMF and supporting establishments, which really helps us to do what we're doing. So, but it's interesting, the position that we're in puts us where we're able to see across the Marine Corps. So whether you work at the battalion or squadron level or up at the MEF or even in a MAR-4, your sight picture is usually the unit that you are in, certainly with a little bit more of the higher adjacent and supported or supporting that are around you. But if you're in a particular MEF, you're not really paying attention necessarily to everything else that's going on and the logistics challenges of the other MEF. We don't even necessarily see that between each of the MUs, although usually the MUs from each coast are sharing a lot of lessons learned. But the opportunity that we have with McLog, part of that is even being here in 29 Palms, is we really see every single unit, whether it's a logistics unit or whether it's a GCE or ACE unit that has logistics in that unit, and we're able to pull the positive trends as well as the negative trends and turn that right around into doing an assessment across the Marine Corps of, okay, what's the state of logistics for the Marine Corps today? As well as then tying to INL and CD&I on a pretty regular basis, as well as McWill, to identify what's the Marine Corps of the future going to challenge, how is that going to challenge the logistics community? So how do we incorporate all of that into what we're teaching at either advanced individual courses or for the collective courses? And then in some cases, wrapping that right back around then even to reviews and refinements, and in some cases, adaptations of some of the Marine Corps warfighting publications, technical publications, as well as some of the other guiding documents that we have out there. So So there is a slide, and Jason, I don't know if you can throw that up, and I'll make reference to just this once, and then we'll swing it back, because I know you might not be able to see the slide extremely well. But there is this slide that is out there that does show this picture. It's pretty small. If you have a big screen in front of you, you might be able to follow it. And thanks, Jason, for that. But what that particularly shows you is ultimately McLog is here for this continuum of learning for the Marine Corps. And all of that is to extend the reach of the force. And what you see in the middle there are pictorial representations, and then this one's spelled out a little bit better than a previous one that we had sent around that talks about each of the programs that we are involved with. But then that circle around is, you could almost call it the strategic OODA loop from the learning continuum side of the house, where it's teaching and coaching, again, at the individual and collective side. Then there's the observation of, here's a unit that's now in an exercise. We're going to observe and as well as control the exercise. And then on the back side of that, through AARs, certainly there's an AAR that goes back to that individual, but then that gets put into really the repository here for us to then make the assessment of how is the Marine Corps doing. There's the internal assessment of how can we do better within the program. Certainly that's a piece of it. But the bigger and more important piece is, what can we be doing better for the Marine Corps? And then that comes right back around in the refinement. And what's pretty amazing is we're able to do that usually 2 to 3 times within a year. So it's not necessarily like the large programmatic pieces. It's, we have 4 of the advanced individual training courses a year. We run and support 3 of the MAGTF warfighting exercises, 3 of the logistics staff training exercises, and then the theater logistics seminars for the MUs and operational logistics seminars for the MEFs occur basically in their own unit life cycle. But each of those are touch points. So sometimes there's even the question of, okay, well, how are we able to assess the value, I'll say, of McLog, and then again, the state of logistics across the Marine Corps. And a lot of that is through the multiple touch points that we actually have. So in our training for the expeditionary logistics instructors, or ELIs, which is similar to the WTIs or the Top Guns, but now from the logistics perspective, we have the touch point with those individuals. Then usually those units are coming through a logistics staff training exercise that's here with McLog, or a battle staff training exercise with McTOG. And then that unit then usually even comes through a life cycle where they're coming to an integrated training exercise here, or a mountain training exercise up in Bridgeport. And then that culminates in now the force on force, peer v peer MAGTF warfighting exercise, where folks are now seeing the true impacts of what it means to be in a contested environment, in a combat environment, and understanding how to balance your resources relative to the scheme of maneuver. And I bring it out that way because this is not just about training that logistics OPSO or training the logistics officer in any unit. It's actually about putting some of the challenges of logistics and logistics resource management into the lap of the commanders across the MAGTF. And we really are starting to see that come into fruition in the MAGTF warfighting exercise, which is pretty incredible. So 3 highlights I wanted to hit, though, because I know talking about the future and where we are right now. So as you pull in the concepts from the Commandant's Planning Guidance and Force Design 2030, as well as the increase of naval integration and that emphasis. And then from our side of the house, the introduction of concepts in the new MCDP 7 for learning. There's really kind of 3 things that are pretty big topics now. So the first one is, we just made the transition from what previously had been called IMLOC, which was the Intermediate MAGTF Logistics Operations course, to a new version called the Advanced Expeditionary Logistics Operations course. Certainly it's more than just the name change, but part of even the name change from intermediate to advanced is to recognize that this is actually meant to be really focused on advancing and broadening the career or broadening the perspective of folks far beyond the tactical level, which is what a lot of us know real well and have practiced real well. So a few of the pieces that are now different in this new AXLOC. First of all, it's all built on a distributed maritime scenario. So the focus here is, instead of falling under a JFLIC from the land component commander operating in places like Iraq and Afghanistan and some of the larger O plans in reality right now that we have, it's now falling under the JIFMIC, which in some cases that's just words, but no, it's a little bit more than just words when you start to think about what does that mean to us logistically. So there's no longer necessarily a whole bunch of truck lines that we can lean on and contract. There's no longer a large theater sustainment command that we can lean on that's already been established. Now, the reality of that is, okay, now we're going to be looking at contracting other transportation means, which is ships and other maritime vessels. And there still is going to be a theater sustainment command, although when you look at the multitude of islands spread across the Western Pacific, that theater sustainment command cannot be everywhere. And that's where there's much more of a lean, particularly on the JIFMIC. The other piece is we're bringing in a lot more Navy participation, both from the instructor side of the house as well as the student side of the house, with an emphasis much bigger than just Navy supply. So we're bringing in the Navy Civil Engineering Corps personnel who can talk to us about Navy, the CB side, the NCR, the larger NEC or Navy Expeditionary Combatant Command, as well as the Navy facility side of the house, which is opening some eyes a little bit more about forward advanced bases and even sustained bases, and then tying that to the fleet logistics centers and fleet readiness centers for resupply as well as repair forward. The other piece that we're looking at from the Navy side is how do we really open people's eyes to understand how the Navy makes decisions for prioritization of their combat logistics fleet, as well as other types of T-class ships that fall under the Military Sea Lift Command. So just broadening people's understandings to how do you plug into that? How do you get into the prioritization of that? How do you get better visibility of that? The next piece, which is pretty significant, is increasing understanding of the operational and strategic level of logistics. So operational meaning the theater logistics, and strategic here meaning service logistics, which I'll come back to that in just a minute. And then the last thing, which is real significant with AXLOC, is a different focus on how we are actually doing the instruction. The AXLOC is there to certify expeditionary logistics instructors. So the other thing we're trying to do is not just up the ante on content, but to understand how to actually instruct a little bit more effectively using adult learning methods. So in layman's terms, we're introducing a lot more historical vignettes, turning them into immersive decision forcing scenarios, and then utilizing those for different types of wargaming. So if I were to say the word wargaming, some folks think of wargaming in the Marine Corps planning process. Yes. Some folks think of a more strategic wargame, which is meant to be more of a well-facilitated discussion, which will end up in perhaps something like an SOP or an execution checklist. Yes. In some cases, it's a Kriegspiel type board game, or in other cases, for some folks who know the Penn State beer game, and some folks are like, wait a minute, what kind of games do you guys play? No, that game is about supply chain management, decision making, as well as just informing folks across the supply chain. That's what that game is about, and opening people's eyes to the importance of integrating across every level of those logistics. So that's what we're trying to inject more, or we have inject more into that particular course, not just to expose students to that, but so those students can bring that back. So in that course now, I probably won't even list all of them, but from a historical perspective, we're grabbing onto certainly some of the World War II vignettes of Guadalcanal, but also Burma, and how do we reach from deep into the jungles up in Burma and working with partner countries and partner nations and trying to get them supported in a pretty complex and also contested logistics environment. We look at Vietnam, not from the Vietnam that many of us look at as the fights North in Khe Sanh, but the Vietnam of the transition from basically doing theater security cooperation now into a fight. And how do we bring a force in and work force closure into places like Da Nang? We look at Task Force 58 and what they did. We looked at Operation Tomodachi and then Operation Unified Response to get folks to realize that, yeah, I know we want to task organize our units. In every logistics unit, we're going to organize ourselves, and this is the way we will always be, and we will deploy that way. Every person on the line right now knows that we're going to task organize every single time. So we need to actually embrace that and let folks understand how to more critically approach that and put together the right team to meet the mission. The other piece which we're doing, which is part of AXLOC, and then we're also looking at doing this more for the future of the logistics staff training exercises, is we've developed a new maritime operational scenario which plugs in real well with distributed maritime operations. The name of it is Pegasus Sentinel, but with that, we're able to pull in some of the new concepts for distributed maritime operations, both from the Navy and Marine Corps perspective, as well as then some of the topics associated with expeditionary advanced-based operations, certainly as we all work through to determine what that concept is and then how do we sustain it. One of the things we are working very closely with McWill and CD&I is what's the force that we are actually going to utilize for that. We need to make sure that the instructors we are training here, as well as the units coming through, are still getting training that is like the units that they currently have today, as well as what they might see within the next 2 years. So basically anything that's already programmed or we know that we can actually contract right now forward, even if we aren't actually putting that onto our own weapon system shelf until a little further out, we can use that now. But there are certain pieces of the 2030 force which we are not putting into play yet, just because there are too many unknowns. So we still need to train the fight, train the individuals and train the units to fight tonight with the force that they have today, although recognizing some of the concepts that certainly can be employed today. And then the last piece of that is we're really trying to get people to broaden their perspective to not just do tactical level logistics of the down and in, but understand how to plug into external logistics. And that's the last point here is there's a lot more talk now of what is operational and strategic level logistics and how do we inform more folks on what that is. And I've actually been in several discussions of, wait a minute, so we can't forget the tactical level logistics, and I completely agree. But use this just as an image. For many of us, we've fought in places where there is either already a mature infrastructure in the theater, or we're under the umbrella of a large MEF or MEB. When you're in that big umbrella, almost everybody inside that umbrella is focused on tactical level logistics. There's just some folks at the higher level and then right on the fringes who are plugging into the theater and in some cases the service level logistics back at home. When we're talking about the future operating environment, particularly distributed maritime operations, that really mandates that every logistics professional is not only able to do the tactical level for the down and in, but has to understand how do you plug into, where do you plug into, and then how do you get into the prioritization to tap into the operational and strategic level logistics as that comes in. So, and that's really what we're trying to do now, not only with the advanced individual training, but with the advanced collective training. The whole point of all of this is certainly about bettering the logistics community, specifically to extend the reach of the force. And sometimes those words, like, those are just words. I bring us back to the beginning. If we say, and I know we do this, we say it and we believe it, if the Marine Corps fights and wins in every climb and place, that is completely on the backs of the logisticians. And I will say that that's actually being much more understood in things like the MAGTF warfighting exercise now, as we have battalion commanders as well as regimental commanders, particularly from the GCE, but across the MAGTF, who are now really understanding the importance of force closure, the importance of force sustainment, as well as even the force protection of what is there to provide them, whether you call that the rear area or just the contested environment that we're living in. There's a much greater recognition of how are we as a logistics community making ourselves able to operate in that environment, but how are we also integrating across the MAGTAF to make sure that it's not just the logistics that supports us, it's the logistics that enables us and is part of the team. So I hit a lot of different topics there, and we could go down several different directions, but I kind of wanted to just give you that kind of state of logistics from the perspective of McLog, and then where we're planning to go with a few of the initiatives. And now I'll open it up for any questions.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. Colonel Angel, my name is Lieutenant Cohen. I'm a student here at the Naval Postgraduate School. I'm in the Defense Systems Analysis program. First and foremost, thank you for putting this on. Any conversation about the logistics training continuum or what the future might look like is incredibly important to me. I'm an 042 by trade, and I care deeply about the logistics community, and especially this tie into the AMCL. If I might ask you a two-part question, sir, my first question is, what is prompting the changes that you are driving at McLog right now? What was the catalyst for those changes?
Yeah, so the catalyst was specifically the CPG first. And then coincidentally, at the same time as the CPG, there was the works were already in the process for MCDP7 learning with at that particular time. That was General Mullen that was really pushing that from all of his perspectives and time within TCOM, within MAGTAF TC, as the MCTOG CG, working with Education Command. So really, okay, how do we get better at teaching and literally even learning? So how do we utilize more adult learning techniques, and then how do we develop more of a culture of learning? But the other piece, which I think is the broader one, is the relationship to, okay, what drove some of these changes? A lot of it came down to the CPG, and then certainly some other discussions off of that. So it's interesting, though. So one of the pieces that I did not really mention too much in detail, but McLog and INL previously had done what was called Naval Logistics Integration or Expeditionary Logistics Seminar, and has recently actually been renamed just the Theater Logistics Seminar, based on a theater that a MU or a Special Purpose MAGTAF will be deploying into. And why I bring that up is those courses were specifically aligned to really open people's eyes to maritime logistics, as well as whatever's in that theater. So plugging into the forward logistics centers or fleet logistics centers, plugging into understanding military sea lift command, understanding any of the theater capabilities, particularly even the DLA. So much of that we were actually doing as a community to educate certain folks. But interestingly, only those folks who were deploying within the MUs and the Special Purpose MAGTAFs. So there was also the recognition that here is this whole other part to really get into the details of understanding theater level logistics, which is not broadly actually being educated or trained. So it was the mixture of that, the mixture of, okay, how do we get at, how do we bring ourselves more broadly back to the maritime roots, and then tie ourselves to a GIFMEC. And then certainly the other thing, which really has come to life since the CPG through all of the force design IPTs, is the understanding of the new fires concepts, and then what that's going to drive into new logistics concepts. And I say new logistics concepts with recognition that many of the concepts of logistics aren't new. It's actually just we're going to be orienting and perhaps decentralizing ourselves a little bit more, organizing ourselves a little bit more, and then in some cases, how do we take one maintainer, because certainly this is one of the ones that each of the maintenance battalions is looking at. How do we take one maintainer who knows one piece of equipment or one family of equipment and actually teach them more about the other pieces of equipment? Because in some cases, a diesel engine is a diesel engine. So why do I just have two different folks that know diesel engines? They know a little bit more than just diesel engines. So, and that's just one of the many venues that the battalions are working through. But I pull out that piece too because of our connection with all of the functional battalions, DS battalions, and then the MU CLBs. We're also able to pull what initiatives are you guys working in some cases making connections then back to McWill and CD&I, and in other cases tying that into discussions here so we can start actually stressing that out a little bit more in the context of a realistic live, or in many cases virtual and constructive exercise.
So with that, sir, the follow-up, I appreciate the direction you went, because that was where I was kind of headed. We talk about looking forward. We talk about basing all this on the CPG, and we talk about, hey, logistics is logistics. It just needs to be tailored for the situation that we're walking into. Is there a tie-in that McLog is considering for advanced force operations? And I realize 90% of that conversation needs to happen on the high side, but is that a consideration? And is it something that McLog is looking at? And if it can be discussed here, how is your conversation being shaped about our tie-in to phase 0?
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different pieces with that, but what I will say is each of the IPTs that CD&I is running, some of them are logistics related and some of them are not. We actually have folks from McLog that are sitting in each of those IPTs, as well as in each of the major McWill war games, because there's a whole lot more McWill war games that they're working. But each of them that's tied to force design, we have folks in there. In some cases, we're providing input to those. In other cases, we're pulling some of those concepts back here to play them out a little bit more at a detailed level, with recognition that, we don't want to introduce any of the future force if it's too far out in the future and it's too futuristic, but certainly we want to plug into some of the innovations. What we can do too, and just plugging into the virtual and constructive piece. So McLog is one of the lucky institutions that actually pulls in some of the mods and sims folks that graduate from the Naval Postgraduate School as well. So we have one, McTog has one, and then MagTaf TC has one, and all of us right now are trying to, okay, how do we get more of the virtual and constructive piece to play out some of these things that either are real today, but we can't realistically have that played out here in live in the desert, or in other cases, how do we fast forward with some of the new capabilities that we think we'll have? So I don't know if that answers each of the parts, but hopefully that provides some insight, Ben.
It does. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, good questions. Admittedly, we don't tie too much specifically into Fort Leonard Wood, but we do tie in quite closely with LOS and all the schools across MCC SSS. So as the supply operations is now changing more to supply chain management, as LOS is in some cases they're not making leaps and bounds, but they're making their refinements in their curriculum. And then the other one is the logistics command or logistics chiefs course. It's the integration with those schools. And part of that too is identifying what gaps exist. So where are you teaching a person up to? And then where are we picking it up? And then what exists in between? And I will say that one of the resounding trends or topics that comes up quite a bit in discussions is, okay, so a guy goes or gal goes to their basic entry-level school to get their MOS, and then we want them to go to AXLOC. And you're telling me that AXLOC is meant more for the majors, gunnies, and master sergeants, although in some cases that will branch out a little bit more, but that's really the aim. So what's out there for the staff sergeants and captains to continue their progression? So part of it is let's talk through other courses that exist within the logistics education programs. So whether they are the courses that are in other schoolhouses, as in universities and colleges that we actually have agreements with, or it's actually plugging into the MPF staff planners course or the Amphib planners course over at EWTG or the joint logistics course. So each of those are opportunities that do exist. There was some previous discussion about trying to align those in and saying a person has to go to those. I would like to say that we can do that, but there's really no way that I think anybody could actually truly enforce that. Because, okay, I'm in a unit and MPF and Amphib operations aren't that important to me. So is that commander going to send those folks to that course, or is that lieutenant or captain then going to say, hey, I think I need to go to this course? Yeah, that's a good course, but I don't think you need to go. Yeah, but I need to take this before I go to AXLOC in 5 years. Well, wait a minute. So yeah, you can go to that course a little bit later. So part of it was the courses. The second piece is the role of the expeditionary logistics instructor, the role of company commanders, battalion commanders, and squadron commanders, is to actually get at those military on-the-job training tasks that are in TNR manuals. And I don't mean to just flippantly toss it to them, but that's certainly what our role as leaders is to continue to work on that continuum of our individuals, recognizing that there is no one standard solution that will work for everybody. And then the last piece is, which we're really trying to drive, is more of a continuum of learning. So intentionally, we used 12 different historical vignettes in this AXLOC. And then at the end of every class, if you're interested in this, here's a course you can go to. If you're interested in this, here are several books that actually illustrate this a little bit more. So hopefully, as folks are going through those courses, and I hate to say that hope is our only course of action here, but hopefully you will generate enough interest with folks to say, hey, I think I can learn a little bit more by having and developing my own culture of learning. So I know that was a much longer answer, but a few different things kind of pulled together. Does that help, Nancy, or did you have another piece?
Yeah. Thanks for your answer, Aaron. Let me explain why I put the Fort Leonard Wood comment in there, because I know that you don't directly interface with them, because that's PFC land at Fort Leonard Wood. I was interested, since you mentioned that you're revolutionizing how you're training, if you're linked in with the Fort Leonard Wood Instructor Academy.
We are not linked in with them, but what we are linked in is the Marine Corps side of that house, which is down at MCC with the curriculum development courses and the other instructor development courses, which they have really revamped those over the past 4 to 5 years as well. So it's not just the, introduce yourself, say what your objectives are, and then right into it. It is actually pulling in some of the again, the adult learning, and I'm going to look back. What was it? The big one, which has been talked about just recently, was the Bob Pike approach for training as well. So, and there's lots of different folks that are out there, but that's one right now that's pretty popular across TCOM for just getting folks to from the instructor side of the house, as well as the curriculum development, and each of those are two different pieces. But I'll look into that then too, and I know our Marine Colonel representative out there, I know him real well then too. So I'll plug it, because I have spent time recently with MCC as well as the Marine Corps Engineer School to strengthen that bond and understand where the gaps are. But the other piece is, even as and I look over to my door as if there's somebody there really isn't, but I tell all of our folks, okay, you are here, and many of you are handpicked because you actually have proven to be a logistics professional. But what you're not a professional in yet is to be an educator and a trainer. And some of them have a little bit of that background, but many of them don't. And that's not meant to be an affront to them. It's more of the, hey, I need you to utilize everything that's in your head about logistics and your specialty. But what our job is to do is to make you a better influencer of people as a teacher, as a coach, as an observer, because even the skills of observing, and then the ability to then wrap that around to actually adjust publications and doctrine then too.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy.
Yes, sir. So Major Pat McCavitt. I'm doing NPS payback at Micatia, which nobody knows what it is, but we do test and evaluation. Sir, I just wanted to ask, in target of opportunity, I'm probably going to add on to this as well, but I'm already in ELI. I went in the early stages of MLOC as a very junior captain. I can honestly say did not get much out of it in that iteration of MLOC. So I'm interested, will folks like me be able to attend this new AXLOC that you've got going, sir?
Yeah, so the quick answer, and for Jason, I'll try to make my answers quicker so we can get to the questions. But yeah, the quick answer is yes. So there will always still be the priority to the folks who are who are either sitting or about to be sitting OPSOs or ops chiefs or particular fours in certain jobs. So we want to get those regimental S4s, the folks that are going up to the MEF G4s or the MU S4s. But outside of that, we're always going to have room, and we want to bring some folks in, particularly from the supporting establishment, as well as for your own career progression too, because recognizing the course is different. And for what it's worth, I will also say the IMLOC itself even made a pretty big adjustment about a year and a half ago to capitalize on some of the challenges that had been seen in the earlier version. And it's always going to be in refinement. And I have the wrestling match with my guys often saying, okay, hey, yeah, you might think that was awesome. It was awesome, but we need to refine it more to make it more appropriate to the Marine Corps today and tomorrow, not the Marine Corps of yesterday. So the opportunities will definitely come up. So where we are in time, just for the group then with this, not in watch time, but AXLOC time. So we just finished our pilot literally last Friday. We're going through a course content review board next week after our after course report that'll occur this week. And then come December, we're then making the refinements. The next course will be in March. And then the intent after that is we have a course every quarter. And some of those courses, we're looking at options to have one in the Pendleton EWTG PAC area, one in the Lejeune EWTG LANT area, and then probably the other two would be here in 29 Palms. So we're looking at some options within 3MEF, but there's some expense challenges that really come into play across TCOM to make that happen. And we can just get some of those folks pushed this way. So did you have a follow on though, Pat?
Yes, sir. Just a slight kind of change from my initial question, but what I'm looking at is, so being at Mikatia doing test and evaluation for all the new stuff that we're looking at purchasing. So we're looking at the law, we're looking at these advanced missile systems. So I'm seeing a lot of structure change from force design in the GCE, seeing a lot of structure change in the ACE. And it seems like the LCE was initially an afterthought. We're going to get rid of Bridge Company. Right now, we've got a CLB-8 with no 8th Marines. So I'm interested as what McLaug is doing to help us move forward with force design and how we're attempting to restructure the LCE, especially as in about 18 months, I'm going to be heading back into the fleet. So I'm interested to see what am I going to walk into that I left 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. So this would be a real good question to ask Colonel Collins when he sits with you guys in a few weeks, and I'll be in on that one too. And that's not just to push it off. So, because I can give you some of the insight. Some of the insight that it is out there is from some of the output from the first iteration of force design was the MLR, and inside the Marine Littoral Regiment is the new Littoral Logistics Battalion, which, like everything as we deploy then, is a task organized unit specifically to that particular mission. Now, what we are actually doing is, in some venues, we are taking that LLB and actually putting that to some tests here in some staff training exercises. We're a little bit watchful on how we do that, because it's not that stuff's classified for that particular topic, but it's more from the viewpoint of, okay, if that's not the way your unit's going to look like in any way, shape, or fashion in the next year or two, then that may not be relevant to you. Other CLBs are coming in right now and saying, hey, yeah, give it to us, because we know we're going to be task organized to whatever the mission is. And we actually did use that exact organization for the recent run of Pegasus Sentinel within AXLOC. So the other piece, which again, more details to come in the future in several different venues, but the intent right now is to actually go back to having more. And there's some different numbers out there, call it 21, call it 18, call it 12, but more task organized, multifunctional combat logistics battalions again. And I say that, okay, hey, we need to stop punching each other in the face and saying, well, why are we bouncing back and forth between functional battalions and multifunctional battalions? Okay, yeah, we bounce back and forth because it's to whatever the needs of the Marine Corps are. And the needs of the Marine Corps right now are pointing us back in that direction, with the intent of task organizing that way at home so that you can train that way and then you'll deploy that way. Is that completely the right answer? yeah, we'll continue to refine that. So, but the intent is to move back in the direction of having more multifunctional battalions. That said, there still is the question of, okay, will there still be some or how many or which functional battalions? So more to follow with that. Then I think Josh might want to jump in. He had jumped up with something about LLB.
Hey, sir, thanks. I appreciate that, sir, for pointing that out. So as the CO of CLB3, right, one of my main targets is reorganizing into LLB3, which we're getting very little guidance on. So Colonel Gaines, who's my boss at CLR3, has really given me kind of carte blanche to do what I think is the right thing. The LCT 1-3 out here in Hawaii are way ahead of us, like way ahead of us. With experimentation, with organization, we're trying to catch up to them and using Mod4 Pack a lot with that. But the intent is I'm going to be reorganized as an LLB informally by the spring so that we can start operating and finding gaps in what we're looking at. So just a little bit on where you're going there. But we're going to start tying into McLaw a little bit. McWill we're tying into for that experimentation and how to really operate and change our doctrine, because it's going to change. We're not going to be driving as much trucks as we used to, right? Transportation is going to be boat transportation as well. So really trying to get Marines to think differently about how we're operating. And that's tough because we're in this mindset of Afghanistan and Iraq. We have got to get away from that because it's going to be different. And it's one of the challenges I have with the Marines is you have to think differently about sustainment. How do I reduce the bulk liquid requirement, which is 80% of my sustainment, right? So how do I reduce the requirement in the island chains? So just some thoughts. If you have any questions, I'm always willing to answer them.
Yeah, one thing I'll throw on just to finish that out then too was again, there's no panacea to all of this, but another opportunity that we can actually help with a little bit right now is every single one of those historical case studies that we recently ran through here are completely exportable as well. And the reason why I bring that up is a lot of this is just opening people's eyes to develop a little bit more familiarity to the challenges of logistics. So if a lot of our folks have Iraq and Afghanistan experience, which for what it's worth in 2 or 3 more years, we're not going to have that much experience anymore. So because we're going to have a whole lot of younger folks who are going to be pushing up through the ranks who no longer have that. So, but what we do have the advantage to do is pull on historical references that might be able to be used to open people's eyes just to know what questions to ask. And that's what we really tried to do quite a bit recently. And we're going to continue to develop those and have those exportable through the McLog portal as a McKeat site too. That's not necessarily meant to sound like the advertisement and promotion that it sounds like. We're here to support you. So one of the things that people particularly have asked recently is, okay, well, can you send me some of these historical case studies? And you probably still need to have somebody who does a little bit of research, but a lot of it there is, okay, here's a slide deck and then some discussions, and then not just questions, but also some discussion concepts to get the discussion going. So just another opportunity that's out there.
Hey, sir, this is Chris Fry. I'm a retired Marine, retired out of INL about 2.5 years ago. Now like one of those slimy contractors, just like Jason. But I'm actually working with E2O right now on the bulk liquid challenge. So it's great to see Josh Gregory, who I knew before, great that made the lieutenant colonel. But some of my questions are, I'm working on that bulk fuel problem, going all the way back, if you can say like all the way back to say our West Coast and going forward. But are you guys looking at TTPs that involve Marines essentially managing supplies aboard, say, the Law, which is, of course, is not fielded yet, but there's some stuff out there, if you will. We're moving in that direction. But the thinking being that Marines are going to have to get better about managing mountains of stuff aboard, let's say the Law, whatever it is, and being able to communicate in open ports, open beaches, shut down ports, shut down beaches, that kind of thing. So that was my questions, if you guys are looking into those areas.
Yeah, so the quick answer I would say is not probably as much depth as we should be. But what we are trying to do is to get people to realize that, okay, hey, your supply Marines aren't just focused on Class 9 and then MRE.
Right.
So you need to be looking across all classes of supply. And even that gets kind of wonky a little bit because the bulk fuelers are the ones that look at fuel. Okay, well, that is so to a certain point, but I want one person who I can go to who can talk me through our readiness across each of the classes of supply. So we are looking at, so whether it's warehouses or whether it's an expeditionary warehouse on a particular beach, or what we were trying to get folks kind of related to the EABO side of the house of, okay, so imagine you have your law that's trucked up with supplies and you roll the law up to a beach, those trucks come off, and then, okay, load up the trucks that are empty, and now that's your mobile supply base. So,
Sure.
And certainly in some cases that's easier said than done. In other cases, okay, well, let's just do it and test it out. So the one thing I did want to draw out, so we had a brigadier from the Royal Commandos who literally was in the Falklands. And he did a historical case study for us. And what was interesting to us is he showed us a picture of something they called the Dracone, which was an underwater fuel bladder.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So it's just interesting sometimes it's just opening up a book and asking some folks, okay, how did you guys do this before? So,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. I'll look more into the kind of supply chain management in an EABO or MD or DMO side.
Yeah, and I would definitely say on the munitions side, the ordnance side, especially when you're talking rockets, I think being able to move that, also, from a sea base, that's an important capability. So just throw that out there.
Oh yeah, way more than what people realize. Because I will say one things we did talk about last week was, okay, hey, let's talk about the Naval Strike Missile, the size of that, right, both in dimensions as well as weight. How is that being moved around? Who is manhandling that? What type of MHE? And do we think we're going to actually have that there? So the good,
right.
Again, we're probably not going to come up with, well, it's not probably. We won't come up with all of the right answers here, but we are actually driving folks to come up with some of the right questions.
Yeah, that's great. No, that's really, I appreciate it, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir, I'll be your squeaky wheel here. I had two questions posted in the chat. So first off, I'm a captain. I'm out at EWS right now, and coming off of some GCE time at the IMLOC course right before COVID hit. I wanted to see if there was any plan for bringing back that log intel integration piece that we had through LIPSI at IMLOC. It seemed like that was a step in the right direction. Specifically, kind of helped Logos speak the language, and it helped us inform a commander as far as targeting enemy logistics systems and really built that habitual relationship between us and the intel guys, so that when we ask, for ISR assets and stuff to take a look at, enemy log, they don't just laugh at us. We heard that piece went away. Is that coming back in any form?
Oh, it did not go away. So we kept it completely, even with this last axe lock, it occurred. So we only had 4 folks in this last one. I already have, so our intel officer told me yesterday that there's 12 folks that want to sign up for the one that's in March. And my question is okay, is there anything we can do for them prior to March, although still keep them on the list for March? So, but from a few different perspectives. So and for folks that did not know this, so we have the logistics intel planners course runs completely concurrent with what was MLOC and now is AXLOC. So they run through the same exact course, although there's a few classes that they separate from, with a specific focus on, first of all, the physical network analysis and understanding open source intel and how that affects logistics. The other side is then understanding how to develop a collections plan to support logistics, whether that's collections related to an enemy, or it's actually collections related to understanding what capabilities and limitations are out there from the logistics perspective. And the other piece which we're trying to do is just get our folks to realize, our folks being the logistics community, of sometimes the stuff that we see plugs into a larger joint force or MAGTF intel piece as well. So we see that. So I've not talked about it too much here, but the MAGTF warfighting exercise, there's the realization that, okay, if you're a CLB out here, you should also be putting up a collections plan to understand what's going on in the battle space. And then the other piece is you're in the battle space. So what are you actually providing as information to push up the chain to answer, in some cases, NAIs, or even just to provide a little bit more visibility to that MAGTF commander of, oh, hey, sometimes even just saying I'm seeing nothing is actually helpful, just to note there's nothing out there, as opposed to, hey, another piece could be, hey, I'm starting to see movement up here, and we just had a whole patrol that just came our way that had a whole bunch of maintenance issues and casualty issues. Okay, that should be indicative of something that just happened in the battle space, and it's kind of a question back to the MAGTF of, okay, do you have a report on that?
And it kind of leads into my second question there, if I can get to it on it. So I've done 3 iterations of MWX so far, as a battalion 4 with a GCE, and then as an ad 4 piece there, and then again as the 4 for 7th Marines, so command element 4 there. What's McLaughlin way forward for integrating into specifically the after action or the play of the scenario out there? I know last time around with 7th Marines, we got to the big after action, and you don't even see logged element ops terms and graphics on the map. We devoted a lot of effort towards specifically targeting enemy logistics and trying to force culmination by picking fights we didn't want to fight. And the way the question was answered when we asked about that in the after action was, hey, we focus on tactics. This isn't a logistics exercise. My counter question would be, well, do you think you can do it without us? But what's the way to really drive like the holistic view at maneuver warfare instead of just like our traditional surface on surface fight there?
Yeah, so a few different angles with that, and I'll try to answer them kind of quickly. So the first one is the if anybody's been involved in MWX or will be involved in MWX, the kind of the last event is actually a final after action review with all the commanders, and in some cases down to the company command level. So the past 2 iterations have been very heavy in maneuver, not even maneuver and fires, but just very heavy on maneuver. So there's a big change that's coming for this one, which executes starting this weekend, where that final after action review will actually be focused across each of the warfighting functions. And then certainly before that, there's actually a separate AAR for each of the warfighting functions, which will then build into that. So that's kind of the AAR wise. But the exercise itself, there's continuous refinement to try to insert the right realism of logistics challenges. So whether that's, okay, hey, you need to plan appropriately to get resupplied with ammunition before you go dry, and then you need to make sure that there's enough time for that ammunition to get there, and there's recognition that if there's not the right force protection around that convoy, you're not getting that ammunition. So that's one vignette. The other one, which is a pretty serious one, is the recognition across the MAGTF of the importance associated with casualties and wounded in action or killed in action. And the decision making for the commanders on the ground, not just the LCE and the placement of the FRIS STP, but the commanders on the ground of, okay, yeah, how am I going to prioritize the movement rearward through my lines to get those wounded in action based on triage back to their appropriate care facility? Or even when there's killed in action, okay, if you have limited truck space, how are you prioritizing the movement of your killed in action and wounded in action rearward? One of the incentives that we built into MWX is if they get the wounded in action back to a level of care, as in a BAS, RAS, or FRIS STP, any of those levels of care, if they just move them back using tactical means, and then we ask them, what would you do? Then we actually put them back into play. That's not completely realistic, but at least it's an incentive to have them do the tactical patient evacuation, which the statistics from the last MWX were there were 680 wounded in action, and 12 of them went back through tactical patient evacuation means the appropriate way. So the good though is this is no longer us as McLog saying, hey, this is important. That's actually the commander or the director of TTECG, as well as even the CG of MAGTF TC saying, hey guys, this is ridiculous. I know you need to fight your war, and we actually do want to make it so that it's the best training ever, because nowhere else can you get that force on force. It's not live fire, but peer v peer, particularly in an urban environment, will get your folks back into play so they can get the good training. But you need to train appropriately to move your folks rearward through the lines and then think of resupply. Because if you're not, to your point, Aaron, you're not going to be able to sustain yourself in the fight. So the quick answer is yes, but we're always working to improve that. So some of it right now, the relationship with ALU is the courses that we can send our folks to. One of the things that we're trying to get our guys to open the aperture for is, okay, how can we be sharing more lessons learned, both from the mods and sims, as well as exercise development too. So the one thing which I'll say to the audience that's here online too. So I know some of you are still wearing uniforms, some of you are not, but we are looking for the best and brightest to be coming this way, although in many cases after their FMF tour, because if I have them here before their FMF tour, everybody in the FMF is saying, why do you have my guy? But we want them coming here. But the interesting thing is, put yourself into this situation, which a lot of us have been in this situation, where, okay, so I'm a major or a master sergeant. I know my MOS well. I know the unit I came from real well. But as a major or master sergeant, I'm not that well connected with folks in INL and CD&I and ALU and the MCC-SSS. And even the school that created my MOS and created me at one point. So some folks are, many folks are not. So the challenge that I give them when they walk in the door, it's okay, I know you are, I really do think that you are an expert in the stuff that you know. And I need you to think back through every job you've had and the biggest issues you've had. And I want you to somehow put that into our curriculum here to develop more familiarity to that. But what you're probably not real good with is being able to connect with folks across the entire Marine Corps at some high levels of command. But I need you to do that. So I have one artillery officer, and he's working with EWTG PAC, EWTG Lance, CD&I, as well as PP&O. He's a captain, so he's being broadened. But the beauty of it though is, yeah, when a person from here does call and say, hey, I'm from McLog, I'm just trying to get a little bit smarter and get plugged in. Thus far, there's been an open door because everybody sees the value in sharing information and sharing understanding and building a stronger, better team. And not just to go out with that as the cliche that it is, but yeah, everybody out, every single headquarters Marine Corps entity and every supporting establishment is there to build readiness. So we're all there to help each other. But good questions, and I'll look a little bit more into the ALU piece.
Good afternoon, sir. Sam Kano here. We're currently out of 29 Palms. Sir, just kind of wrapping up command and staff, and we have a lot of discussions in there in regards to the Commandant CPG and looking at General Dana's his document that came out in 2017 of hybrid logistics. So, and then to EABO. So my question to you, sir, is looking at the CPG with a logistical lens, the Marine Corps is not equipped and trained to meet the demands of the rapidly evolving future of operational environments. Do you think, with an eye on future of EABO, is the Marine Corps overly confident in being able to resupply faster and smarter logistics? And would we be ready to conduct EABO today?
So I'm not just saying this because I'm a Marine logistician, but one piece is okay, hey, yeah, we'll make it work. The reality is we will make it work. And part of that is the historical context. But the other piece of this, and going back to, so one of the things that I know Lieutenant Colonel Gregory brought up is there is some eye-opening for some folks to say, hey, we're not moving in trucks, we're moving on vessels, gentlemen and ladies. But the reality is we're still moving. So, and we do actually know how to plan movement and sequence movement and prioritize movement. It's just we're moving with different stuff. So I'm of the opinion that, okay, we may not have all of the right equipment, but we do actually have folks that know how to do it, or at least know what questions to ask. And then we just need to create adaptability in them to figure out, okay, what can you plug into? Now, at the end of the day, when it really comes to, okay, hey, listen, I need to actually move from here to there. Okay, on any given day, the answer to that still may be, no, that's not feasible. But right now, even so think about it from this perspective. So we're talking about EABO, which I know some folks are still trying to work. Well, we're all trying to work on specifically what EABO means and what that means from a logistics perspective. But we also talk about distributed maritime operations. There's folks right now in 3MEF and 7th Fleet that actually live out there and do this every day. So we can't forget that, actually. So, and that's just something we actually, as a community, need to look to each other to say, wait a minute. This isn't Mars. Like, we actually have folks that live and operate and do exercises out there all the time. How do they do it? And then the next question would be, well, there's actually people that live on these islands. How do they actually sustain themselves? And those are the types of questions we need to ask ourselves. And there's gain and risk in all of those, because I know that in some cases I'm pointing to contracted means and host nation support and what happens when we shift from competition to a combat scenario now, and can we really rely on them, or might the Chinese be able to follow us if we contract through them? Yes, to all of those. But don't forget that those actually exist. So, and don't forget that we actually operate in those environments right now. Are we going to find some times when we say, no, that's not possible? Yes. Are we then going to get a weird look back at our faces saying, no, you need to figure it out? And are we then going to go back and look and try our best? Yes, and we still might come back and say, no, that's not. So I'm probably right now more optimistic. Now, ask me another day when I'm not being recorded, and I'll also explain that I'm a little bit more pessimistic. But the truth of the matter is, I really am more optimistic about this because of, first of all, as logisticians, we make it work, but that's not going to hold us forever. The reality, though, is these are places that we live in and operate in right now. We have stuff that can make it work. It just might not be the most effective and might not be the most efficient, but it's still an option. What we need to do right now is we need to start opening our minds, opening our books, making some phone calls, doing more Google searches to figure out how this works right now. So I can go both ways, and depending on what time of the day you get me, Sammy, I might give you a different answer. But that's really how I do feel, though. And the last plug I'll give is more than anything else right here. So I gave my guys the number one priority here isn't necessarily, hey, it's AXLOC or it's the logistics staff training action. The number one priority is creating and sustaining critical thinking and adaptable expeditionary logistics instructors. So that's really the bigger piece. There is critical thinking and adaptability more than the instructor side of the house, and that's what we're trying to do here, both through the collective training as folks come through, or from the individuals. But yeah, if you want, Sammy, you can come up to the road at some point and we'll have a different discussion, because admittedly, I am actually pretty pessimistic about some of the things right now, but I know it can still work. It's just that it's going to be somewhat sloppy, not as effective, and not as efficient.
No, sir. Thank you very much for your time and honest feedback on that. So, optimism 100% is not reality, and you bring some points in there that we have to be honest brokers in regards to, some of this stuff is not going to work, and some of those points are pessimistic. So, yes, sir. I'll take up on your invitation. I might stop by on your office, bypass the XO. Just kidding.
Yeah. Just don't tell them. You're good. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Yeah, it was great. Thanks for the opportunity too.